Hi, everybody. Welcome to Santa Cruz Beach Volleyball Clinic, coaching clinic, I should say, 2024. This is our second year doing this in the summer. I think we've done 3 of them, right, Al? Yep. Yeah. So I'm super excited. We got Al Adamsen here again to present, and we have Gary Hodge, San Jose State head coach, women's beach volleyball team. He's going to talk to us a little bit about ecological dynamics, motor learning, and constraints-led coaching. Hopefully give us some tips and insight onto how to implement that in our coaching. I'm just going to kick it off with a tiny bit of admin. Essentially, everybody's going to get some new hiring materials in the next week or so as I set it up on QuickBooks. And essentially what that means is you're going to have to set up a QuickBooks account and direct deposit, and you'll have a time tracking thing. You don't have to track like clock in, clock out, but similar to what we've done with the spreadsheets, by the end of the month, as soon as you can, essentially, you got to clock your time so that you get paid. There's also, you'll be getting W-2s at the end of the year, so we're doing, everybody's going to be part-time employees. Taxes will be withheld. The nice thing about that is SC Beach is now paying half of your taxes. I talked to an accountant, and that's how that works. I did not know, but I've learned a little more than I want to know about employment taxes in the last couple weeks, and yeah, figuring out payroll, getting us all up to date as a nonprofit. I might have 1 or 2 more things at the end if I think of anything else, but I'll pass it off to Al.
All right.
Al.
Thanks, Ivan. All right, I'm going to talk briefly about what it is to be a coach and what it means to me personally, and ask or answer any questions that you might have, and we'll take probably 10 minutes. First off, I am Al Adamsen. I am a father. Son is 23, daughter is soon to be 21, and I was doing a presentation in Mexico City last September, and it was on purpose and identity and the future of work. And it was a wonderful experience in front of a couple thousand people. And the organizers asked me a question after my presentation, because I asked them, ask me anything, I can handle it. Just imagine you were in the audience and what comes to mind for you. I did not think that through very well, because the question came at me in Spanish. So I was given an earpiece, and I was trying to listen because I know a bit of Spanish, and I was trying to get the earpiece in my ear so I understood. And unsurprisingly, the MC, the organizer, asked me, well, you talked a lot about purpose. What's your purpose? And I, on the spot, in front of a couple thousand people, I had to sit back and come up with something very quick. And I said, my purpose is to create safe places for people to thrive. And it was something like that. And I was pretty pleased with my response, because I do that as a father, I do that as a coach, I do that as a business leader. And I had the great fortune of being in a leadership position. As you two know, I've coached volleyball, football, basketball, soccer, track over the years. So I love coaching. I don't have any illusion that I'm a quote-unquote a great coach, but what I do know is that I'm very purposeful. I'm very intentional about how I coach. If you ask most anyone who's played any of those sports on the teams that I have the honor of coaching, they'll say, what's most important, Al? And they'll likely say safety. So physical, emotional, and psychological safety. If there's not safety on a team, then the ability to thrive and be your best self as an athlete, as a person, is not present. So as we coach young people in particular, there's a lot of self-talk that's going on in their heads, right? And so one of the things that I would like to leave you with today are the power of intention for you as a coach. So we talk about intention and appropriate response. So I'm not going to put you on the spot right now but I would hope you have a coaching philosophy. You have a purpose for getting out there. Yeah, you're making some money. Yeah, I know you're very skilled and accomplished at the sport. It comes easy for you, but for many of the players that you're going to be coaching, it's not going to be the same way. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to have a lot of internal dialogue that hopefully you can quiet down and help them be more self-aware, self-compassionate, and in turn perform at the level that, where they are at that point, and not take steps back. So if they're progressing and they fall in love with the sport and fall in love with the community around the sport, then their propensity to come back and enjoy it, whether it be next week or 10 years from now, goes up. And hopefully that's the metric that you're longing for, is that, do these young people want to come back and play the game tomorrow, next week, next season, whenever it is? Because I know that's a metric, for me, because I want to instill the love in the sport. But I also want to elevate self-awareness, self-compassion. So I want you to be aware of this for yourselves as a coach, as a player, and as a person, shrinking the inner critic and elevating the compassionate witness. Shrinking the inner critic and elevating the compassionate witness. So again, a lot of your players will be self-critical. You'll see it in their body language. You see it in the facial expression, what they say. How can you take them aside and coach them up and create that environment where it's okay to make mistakes, so they can bounce back and get ready for the next play and do their best in that moment. So staying fully present. So part of my philosophy as a coach is, not only do I want to elevate self-compassion and self-awareness, yes, I want to elevate levels of grit, perseverance, resilience, so they can actually come back. And particularly in our sport, how often mistakes happen? All the time. They happen all the time. So we have to get ready for the next play. So as I wrap up here, I'm often asked as a coach, what can I do better? And as a leader, what can I do better? So many of people in power, whether it be, in business or coaching or some, even a team lead, they have this propensity to tell as opposed to ask. So what I would hope for you all is to stay in what I would call compassionate curiosity, growth mindset, and look for what's right as opposed to what's wrong. And instead of tell, there's a time for instruction, certainly. But think about, as you, an athlete, when you made a mistake, did you know the mistake that you made? 9 out of 10 times, yes. A coach coming and telling you that specific mistake, is that helpful? Oftentimes, absolutely not. That is about the coach showing his or her knowledge. It's not about me as a player. So what I would encourage you all to do is go ask question. Hey, how was that for you? What can you do better based on that play, that exchange, and see what they come back with. And if they don't come back with something that you saw, then there's an opportunity to invite some idea on how they can move forward. So this is where I'll wrap. As players, as people, after the basics, in my view, we want 3 basic things. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be empowered. In other words, we don't want to be ignored, we don't want to be invisible, and we don't want oftentimes to be told what to do. We want to be empowered to take the appropriate action. So then it invites the question, how do you do that? And so again, staying in compassionate curiosity, creating space. If we had more time, we talk about how to let the dead space do the heavy lifting. Don't talk over yourself, don't talk over the player. So again, creating that space so they can thrive and enjoy the activity that they're engaged in. So with that, as I deal with my runny nose, any questions before we move on? No? So I will share this as last. I will remain a resource to you all as coaches throughout the year. So if you have some struggles or challenges or ideas that you want to explore, by all means, let me know. I have the great privilege of leading research, consulting, and behavioral science for a company. So what I'm talking about is my profession. It's what I do. And I don't imagine that or pretend that I'm some guru or the like on this. At the same time, what I'm sharing is not just Al's ideas. It's based on research and leading practices. Yeah.
In my group right now, much the same level, which is nice.
Uh-huh.
But I've seen that their mentality and how they brush off their mistakes are at a significant difference.
Mm.
And so I see that they can all play together, which is really amazing for drills and for all of them to progress together. But I just see one person make a mistake and they're able to brush it off, laugh about it, go around next play, and they seem like they're having a great time. And then the other player, while they're the same level, if they make the same mistake, I see she puts her head down. And I just wondering how I can like make like coach in a way that gives to their different skill set of their mindset, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. So thank you for noticing that, number one, because there's I'm trying to refrain from going into research on this. Appreciating the diversity of the players athletically, to your point, mentally, and their predispositions. Like they might have gotten an argument before walking out of the car with their parent or brother or sister, whatever. So we have no idea how they show up. But what I do, and I do this in my routines and setting the table for practice, is making or creating an environment where everyone's fully present. So, okay, you're present with me. So once we start the drills, and to your point, if you see different reactions to similar mistakes, there are going to be different ways that you're going to have to show up for each and every player. So having tools in your toolkit on how to approach different players is going to be something that you're going to develop over time. I think one of the things as a baseline to be consistent with is what I just shared around compassionate curiosity and just seeing what their self-talk is. What's going on for you right now? What do you think? And just create that empowerment, create that dialogue. And I'll emphasize this point too, not talking over yourself. So letting them think a little bit so they have time to respond. So not all kids are going to be at the same level of resilience or grit or the capacity to come back. And I will say it. Stephen Pinker, Harvard psychologist, talks about Western society's ignorance of human nature, and we have certain predispositions as human beings. So don't get frustrated, because it's not about your expectations with a player. They're in their place, you do what you do, and let it be, and let them process, let them work it out, but be very clear with your intentions and your hope for them. If they realize you are on their side, as opposed to someone who's being adversarial, the propensity for them to engage both immediately and over time will be much, much higher. So that's a great question. All right, anything else before I turn over the floor? And again, we can continue this discussion as we go. I will say this as I wrap. Coaching, and this is true of leadership, the best coaches remain students of coaching. There's no like, oh, I got this done. Same with leadership. The best leaders remain students of leadership, because the team, the dynamics, even if it's the same human beings, they evolve. So you as a coach have to evolve as well. So just enjoy yourself too. I would be remiss if I didn't say that. Keep smiling and create that environment, because the level of energy on the court or at practice is never going to exceed that of the leader. So you have to show up and bring that positive energy, and then everyone else can move into that space. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for your questions, and turn it over. Here you go.
Thanks, Al.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hi, my name is Gary Hodge. I'm the head of the San Jose State Beach Volleyball Program. I've been coaching the Bay for 18 years. And I'm here to talk about coaching through an ecological dynamics lens, and the specific application of constraints-led coaching. I don't think that there could have been a better setup, because from where I'm kneeling, ecological dynamics is really all about player empowerment. That's a huge piece of it, because essentially what we do as coaches is, instead of determining exactly what they're going to do, we set up an environment and let them what we call self-organize within the environment. And that gives them a ton of autonomy. Autonomy is the big piece. We know that it's one of the biggest motivators that we have as humans. I'm sure I could tell you all about self-determination theory. and all those concepts that are super supportive of autonomy and all the beneficial mental health outcomes that come from that. So I couldn't agree more, and this couldn't be a more perfect handoff, because the concepts, the technical and tactical concepts that I'm trying to put on sand through ecological dynamics dovetail with all of that. My background is in sociology. My bachelor's is in sociology. I was kind of on a path to be a social worker, so I think we're of the same mind in that sense. I'm now finishing a master's in kinesiology and motor learning at East Bay, and trying to be a lifelong learner as much as I can. But boy, trying to keep up with you young people in the classroom, whoo! I'm trying. So anyway, again, I could go on and on about the science. Ecological dynamics is the marriage of ecological psychology and dynamical systems. It's a psychology thing and a mathematics thing. What we know about dynamical systems, we're moving into that in a lot of different fields, is that things aren't as simple as we think they are, and they're typically complex systems that are interrelated. So I, as an athlete, if I'm an athlete, I'm a complex system. My partner's a complex system, the game is a complex system, and all these systems are going to interact. And that's one of the basis of dynamical systems. That's why it's a part of this. Ecological psychology tells us about how we interact with our environments cognitively and behaviorally. So that's all about affordances. So I'm going to start moving into some terms, and affordance is going to be the first big one. And I'll pull out my prop. So an affordance is the intersection of a task, an individual, and an environment. So here I have a pen. If I were sitting at a desk in a classroom, this pen would afford writability. I would write with it. Let's say I was just in an empty room and it was stiflingly hot and there was a window there, but the window wouldn't stay open. Maybe I would open up that window and this pen would afford propability. I could prop that window. Completely different use. Maybe I'm being attacked. Maybe there's a bear rushing at me and I'm ready, and then this pen has a different affordance, it's stabability. Those are intersections. Like in a classroom, the environment is a stifling environment. It's me, my feelings, the individual, and the task is to try to cool down that environment. So the intersection would let me see what this pen could be used for. A volleyball presents us with tons of affordances, almost too many. I would argue that for younger kids, you let the ball determine the affordances. As you get older, you want your opponents and your partner to determine your affordances. So I'll just say that if I'm a younger player, if I'm coaching a younger player and she's being pushed by her set, I would want her to recognize the situation of the set earlier and try to get to that ball visually and physically and see that affordance of a push set earlier, maybe take that step out to that ball so she can get to her plant. But as she gets better and that set gets more consistent, I would want her to read the affordances that the defense provides her. Where is that defender? Where is the blocker pressing? How can you swing past her? How can you shoot past the defender? Those are the affordances that you're looking for out there. So as we get better as athletes, we push out into the environment a little further. It's proximal and distal, so our affordances are a little more closer to us, a little more proximal to us early on, and as we get a little more skilled, they can be a little more distal, have a little more distance from us. So that's that kind of process between working with younger kids up to higher level kids. You're kind of trying to ride that ride and climb that mountain with them. A cool thing about ecological dynamics is that, again, it's environmental. So my job as a coach is that I'm gonna, let's say I want players to work on a wrist away swing. Okay, I could tell them that. I could verbally give them that information, but that verbal information isn't going to translate to movement very well. We know that quite well from the science. So what I might do is just drag a line and put a bonus point on that part of the court, and if you hit that shot, if you find that affordance, you are rewarded with an extra bonus point or something of that nature. Or maybe you can only, if I really want to clamp down on them, you can only score there. So you have to try to find that affordance more and more. That's a little bit of overload. But maybe we want to push that issue a little bit more. I would then step off and let them have control of that environment. It will be messy, but learning always is. It is the illusion of mass practice. I forget who coined that phrase, but if you had me do something over and over again, I would get better at it in that moment. But if you then plug me back into the chaos of the game, that probably wouldn't transfer. It's very unlikely to transfer. We're going to find transfer in the chaos. We won't see it right away because transfer numbers are like 1% to 3%. We're never going to see that in the chaos of sand. But if we are doing it well and we are using these affordances and constraining our players, that number could jump from 1% to 3%. We're never going to see that. But over time, that's a 200% increase in effectiveness. And over time, that's really going to start to show up. And I think that's just a better way to do it. I'll talk a little bit more about specific constraints that I use, but one of the things about this whole system is I can't give you like drills or anything, but I can give you a concept and a framework that you can take a look at a group of kids and say, okay, I need to constrain them this way to get them to do this more, but I've got to let them be free enough to see the affordance. They have to choose that affordance among many. We can simplify it and maybe give them the choice of an affordance among a couple, but we don't want to reduce it. I don't want to just toss balls for a player to hit, right? Why not? Why not? What are we losing there? So many things, right? I have to pass the ball. Then I have to transition. I have to manage my distance from the net, my angle. I have to stay behind the ball with timing. I have to read the set on the run. I might have to read my setter. There's so many aspects of that skill that are missing that when we reduce it to that point, we're just kind of taking away all the things that are going to allow them to use it in a game. And it might look good for a minute in that situation, but that's an illusion, and when they get back out into the chaos, that stuff is going to dissipate. So that kind of leads me into one of the dangers of this method of coaching. If you're constraining, if I'm constraining an area of the court or trying to work on something like that, and I step off, nobody sees me coaching. And in our current culture of coaching, we see coaching as talking, as getting on there and getting on the court and creating a situation where it's kind of about me. And I'm hitting balls at you, and I'm giving you feedback, and your success or lack of success is kind of based on me and my judgments. And that kind of feels good, because if you do it right the way I like it, then I give you positive reinforcement and you feel good. I feel good because I have all the knowledge. I'm giving you the knowledge. I feel smart. But unfortunately, we know from the science that stuff just doesn't transfer. It just doesn't show up on the court at a high level. The two words that I really think about the most are effective and efficient. Good and bad are a little too vague. Is what we're doing going to be effective, and it's going to be an efficient use of our time? And again, is it going to be supportive of positive mental health outcomes? Is it going to be supportive of growth, of kids growing up? You know, even 12-year-olds want to have a little bit of control. They don't want to just stand in line waiting for their rep. They want to play, and kids want to play, and an ecological lens allows us to give them that environment. But one of the problems when we have a product that we have to get out to the community, or pretty much that situation, because in the college level we kind of recruit them and then they're ours and we don't have to worry about that as much. But again, as club coaches, it's a little more difficult, because if you step back, then maybe you have parents and players who are seeing you as not coaching as much or enough. And somebody who steps on the court and starts doing all that stuff looks like they fit that mold a little bit more, but they are being less effective and efficient by a fairly substantial margin. They're also putting themselves at the center of success and not allowing players to find success that is meaningful to themselves. Pleasing a coach is great, but I don't think that's the way to success. I would disagree. We all kind of need to find our own path. And that's a part of growth. That's a part of growing up. That's a part of becoming a better athlete. And an ecological system, when we're talking about constraints, to back into that space, is all about the individual, the task, and the environment. So you can constrain any aspect of that. If I'm on a court, like I said, I can drag a line. If I want a player to reach higher, I cannot tell you how many times, and I said it myself as an early coach, when a player contacts the ball here, I'll tell him, you got to reach higher. Well, if you think about that, if everything was the same and the ball's here, if they reached higher, then that's what's going to happen. I would disagree that is the answer. The answer is to get to that ball quicker, cut it off before it falls. And that doesn't have to do with it looking a certain way. We want them to find their situation to reach high, and that just means maybe their arm swing has to be a little quicker. Maybe they bring their arm a little bit back more so they can get quicker. Maybe they need to pop up to the ball a little bit quicker. But that's up to them. That's going to be determined by the way that they self-organize with that constraint. What I would do in that situation, maybe I raise the net. Maybe I force them into a situation where they have to reach higher. They're not going to be able to execute the task successfully. So I change the environment a little bit, which kind of changes the task, which forces them to self-organize a little bit. What I get to do in that situation is hang back, give them this problem, and then oftentimes they come to me. Coach, I'm trying to get it. Okay, well here, maybe this is something you can try. And then all of a sudden, I'm not barking at them, telling them what to do. We are now in a dialogue where we are trying to figure out this process together. And wow, is that really strong, really effective, really efficient, and really good for the sort of outcomes that we want from a behavioral standpoint, from a mental health standpoint. And I just think, I know from the data, the academic data, that it's the most effective way. If you open any kinesiology textbook right now in the country in any motor learning class, ecological dynamics is the way that we're headed. And just to back up a little bit, the old schema theory sort of concept of motor programs and inputs and outputs, something that's really interesting to me is that stuff developed alongside of computer programming. Those two fields were developing at the same time through the 50s and 60s and becoming mainstream together, and it makes sense that they came about that way. But now we know through dynamical systems and ecological psychology that it's not really the way that people interact and learn skills. So we're just moving forward and trying to evolve our understanding of these things. So I would challenge you, if you want to coach through an ecological lens, to just figure out the movement, the behavioral result that you want, and constrain their environment, maybe constrain the task in a way that forces them to do that thing that way. A way to constrain the task is a scoring system. Maybe you constrain the scoring system and you say, you can only score with that wrist away. If I want them to work on a higher reach, you have to swing at least 0.75% to get the ball down, and I raise the net. So they've got to put some pace on it and reach high. Those are just simple concepts to try to frame it for you. But again, you're going to have to find your space with your learners. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. But I'll also say that it takes time. I agonize and sit at my desk in front of my laptop, an empty screen, and try to think, okay, how am I going to get Mia to hold her shoulders into the angle and cross body? She's all wrist away. This is the motor pattern that she's got, that she's learned, and I want to force her to get into this stuff. And I got to figure that out. I got some big ideas. I'm going to stand in the corner, and as you approach, I want you to face me. I'm going to be looking right at you. And then you're going to swing the other way as you're still facing me. And I'm just going to be, the pressure. Or I'll put some social pressure on them, and I'll put a teammate over there. And maybe the teammate's going to score them. And we get a little bit of social pressure there. This is their environment, where they're working together to figure this thing out. And then I can get in there and talk about some stuff and help out here and there. Again, I feel like it's a perfect dovetail to what we want to give our athletes these days as we're learning more and more about mental health. We know more about motor learning. But we're still kind of stuck in an old paradigm of coach-centric behaviors, and it's about me, and I am the giver of the knowledge, I'm the giver of the wisdom, and you're just a vessel that I'm going to give stuff to. I don't know that that's the way. So at the end of the day, that's kind of my spiel. I could really go much, much deeper into all that, but it would mostly be science, so we're not going to go there. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys coming out. And I am also available. Ivan has my contact information. I'm going to be working with the club. So if anybody has any questions, if you're trying to figure out a constraint for a drill or something or an individual player, reach out. I'll tell you what I got. But at the end of the day, my lens is as good as yours. And yours is definitely as good as mine. And we're all just trying to figure it out.
Cool. Well done.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions?
I had one, but I forgot.
Okay.
I'll try to remember.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very hard for me to simplify it into a short presentation.
We'll talk briefly so you can think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, very much. Thank you, Al. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to say that my view on coaching has changed a lot, particularly over the last year working with Gary. It had started to change probably a little before that, but I was always a person that like practice is a place where you practice and you get better and you do drills and you work on your, triangle setting was my thing. I thought triangle setting was the best drill ever, and I still do like it as a fitness drill. But now, my mind's been opened, and essentially that's all I really hope for. I think that's my favorite part of coaching is just the fact that I always feel like I'm learning and learning new things and learning new things about people, and also being the director is also, I'm learning a ton about taxes. So yeah, and the cool thing when I get to coach these days is essentially I have them play. A lot of times at SC Beach we have younger kids, so we're playing smaller court games. And then I ask them a question, and usually they ask a bunch of questions, and a lot of times they have the answer that I was looking for in the first place, of how, what are the better strategies. And yeah, they figure it out, and it's really, really cool to see. So I did also want to reemphasize that and sort of echo Gary's point of like, it may not feel like coaching all the time, and it may feel a little weird based on our traditional view of coaching. But I've seen so many positive outcomes that I'm a full-on believer in it. Every once in a while I doubt it a little. I'm like, like maybe I should be telling them more, and these younger kids, maybe they really need, to focus on their platform more, and they don't. They don't. They need to play and figure it out, and they do.